You think that growling in your stomach is a danger signal. You think it means something is wrong with you. Son, I am 99 years old, and I am here to tell you the opposite is often true. That quiet rumble is not always weakness. Sometimes it is the sound of your body finally getting a chance to breathe. I have lived long enough to watch 3 generations change the way they eat, and I can tell you plainly that the greatest mistake people make after middle age is never giving their bodies a moment of rest. They wake up and eat. They sit down and eat. They feel bored or worried or tired, and they eat again. By the time night falls, their organs have been working without pause for 16 straight hours. Then they wonder why their strength fades before they even reach 80. When I was a young man, food was not a constant companion. It was an event. We worked first. We earned our hunger. Sometimes we waited until the sun was standing high above the fields before we tasted our first bite. Those long stretches of emptiness did not destroy us. They forged us. Our minds stayed clear. Our joints stayed steady. Our sleep came deep and honest. What most people call hunger today is not true hunger at all. It is habit. It is dependency. It is a body that has forgotten how to switch from burning fuel to repairing itself. If you truly wish to survive into old age with dignity, the first lesson is simple and uncomfortable. You must learn how to stop eating long enough for your body to remember its ancient wisdom. I did not understand this lesson when I was young. Back then, I believed strength came from fullness. I believed a man proved his vitality by how much he could put on his plate and how quickly he could clear it. When you are 20 or 30, your body forgives your foolishness. It runs like a new engine, bright and hot, able to carry heavy loads without complaint. But time is a patient teacher. It does not shout. It whispers through stiffness in the morning, through breath that shortens on the stairs, through nights when sleep slips away like a shy animal. By the time I reached my late 50s, I began to notice something unsettling. Men I had grown up with, men who were once stronger than me, started to fade. Some grew thick around the middle and slow in their movements. Others became thin in a different way, brittle and tired, as though life itself had been drained from their bones. They spoke often about their diets, their supplements, their doctor's visits, yet none of them spoke about rest. Not the rest of lying in bed, but the deeper rest that comes when the body is not forced to labor over digestion every waking hour. You see, digestion is work. It is invisible work, quiet and relentless. When you eat, your blood shifts its priorities. Energy that could be repairing tissues or calming inflammation is diverted toward breaking down food, absorbing nutrients, stabilizing sugar levels, managing hormones. It is an intricate orchestra of chemical reactions, and like any orchestra, it requires silence between performances. If you demand music without pause, the musicians grow exhausted. Their timing falters. The melody becomes noise. In my early 60s, after a winter illness that left me weaker than I cared to admit, I stumbled upon this truth in the most ordinary way. I simply lost my appetite for a few days. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet refusal from my stomach. I drank water. I sat near the window and watched the light move across the floorboards. On the second day, I expected to feel frail, but instead there was a curious clarity in my mind. My joints felt less swollen. My breathing came easier. It was as if some hidden maintenance crew had been working through the night, tightening bolts and oiling hinges I did not know were loose. That experience unsettled me more than the illness itself. It forced me to question everything I had been taught about constant nourishment. I began to experiment, gently at first. I delayed breakfast by an hour, then two. I noticed that the sharp hunger I feared would overwhelm me often dissolved into a calm, steady alertness. Later, I tried ending my meals earlier in the evening. Instead of heavy suppers that sat in my stomach like stones, I allowed the night to be a time of internal quiet. Sleep deepened. Mornings became less of a battle. Now, I am not a scientist. I am an old man who has lived inside one body for nearly a century, but I have listened carefully to what this body tells me. It speaks in sensations more honest than any advertisement or fashionable diet trend. It tells me that there are seasons for intake and seasons for repair, just as fields must lie fallow between harvests to remain fertile. So must the human organism experience intervals of emptiness to preserve resilience. In the decades that followed, I watched the world accelerate. Food became more abundant, more convenient, more engineered to demand attention. People began to carry snacks as if they were talismans against weakness. They feared the smallest discomfort, the slightest dip in energy, interpreting it as danger rather than adaptation. Yet the human design has not changed as quickly as our environment. We are still creatures shaped by cycles of feast and pause, effort and restoration. As I moved into my 70s and then my 80s, this understanding became less of an experiment and more of a discipline. I learned to trust the quiet hours when my stomach was empty. I treated them not as deprivation, but as investment. During those hours, my thoughts felt organized, my movements economical. I could work in the garden for longer without fatigue. Even minor ailments seemed to pass more quickly, as though my internal systems had more resources available to address them. Friends would ask me what medicine I was taking, what secret tonic I had discovered. I would smile and tell them the truth. Sometimes the most powerful intervention is subtraction. Not another pill, not another elaborate regimen. Simply the willingness to step back from the table and allow the body to complete tasks it has been postponing. There is humility in this approach. It requires admitting that we are not always improved by adding more. In a culture that celebrates accumulation of possessions, of experiences, of flavors, choosing emptiness can feel almost rebellious. Yet survival past 80 is not a matter of excitement or indulgence. It is a matter of conservation. It is about managing the finite currency of biological energy with the wisdom of someone who understands that waste, even pleasurable waste, carries a cost. Looking back now, I see that learning when not to eat was as transformative as learning what to eat. Both lessons arrived slowly, through observation and trial, through listening to subtle signals rather than dramatic crises. And if there is one thing I wish I could hand to younger generations, like a well-worn tool, it is this. Your body is constantly negotiating between growth and repair. The longer you force it to stay in growth mode, the less opportunity it has to restore what time and stress inevitably erode. By the time a man reaches his 80s, he begins to understand that survival is not guaranteed by strength alone. It is shaped by restraint. I have buried men who could outlift me, outrun me, and outshout me in their youth. They were powerful in the way a wildfire is powerful, bright, impressive, and tragically short-lived. What they lacked was not food or opportunity. What they lacked was the discipline to let their bodies cool, to let their systems recover from the constant strain of abundance. There is a quiet violence in modern living that few people recognize. It is not the violence of war or disaster, it is the violence of excess. When you eat from sunrise to midnight, when you never allow your blood sugar to settle or your organs to pause their endless labor, you create a storm inside yourself. It does not arrive all at once. It gathers slowly, like clouds thickening over a calm field. Years pass. Then suddenly, a diagnosis appears. Heart trouble, metabolic disease, joints that grind like rusted hinges. People call it bad luck or genetics. I have come to believe it is often exhaustion, biological exhaustion. In my late 80s, I spent a season helping care for an old friend who had fallen ill. He was a good man, generous and hard-working, but he had lived his entire life in fear of hunger. Even after retirement, he grazed through the day like a restless animal. Crackers in the morning, pastries with his coffee, sandwiches, sweets, late-night bowls of comfort that dulled his worries for an hour, but deepened his fatigue for years. Sitting beside his bed, I could almost feel the weariness in his body, the sense that every internal mechanism had been running on overtime for decades. One afternoon, during a rare moment of clarity, he asked me how I still managed to walk the hills behind my house without losing my breath. I told him the truth as gently as I could. I said that survival in old age is less about how much you consume and more about how much you conserve. Your heart, your pancreas, your liver, these are not machines you can replace when they fail. They are loyal servants that will work for you faithfully if you give them cycles of effort and cycles of peace. He listened, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. The idea that doing less could achieve more felt foreign to him. That is the paradox of longevity. The habits that keep you alive into advanced years often look unimpressive to the outside world. Skipping a meal does not earn applause. Ending dinner early does not make headlines. Yet these small, consistent acts of restraint accumulate into something extraordinary over time. They preserve the elasticity of your blood vessels, the sensitivity of your metabolism, the clarity of your thinking. I have felt this preservation within myself. Even now, approaching a full century on this earth, there are mornings when I wake before dawn with a sense of quiet readiness. My stomach is empty, my mind is alert, and there is a lightness in my movements that surprises people who expect frailty. This is not a miracle. It is the result of decades spent respecting the rhythm of nourishment and withdrawal, input and recovery. When the body is not constantly occupied with processing food, it turns its attention inward. It repairs micro-injuries. It recalibrates hormonal signals. It clears cellular debris that would otherwise accumulate like dust in an unused room. There were times, of course, when I ignored these rhythms and paid the price. After the loss of my wife, grief pushed me into habits I had long outgrown. I began eating late at night, seeking comfort in fullness rather than confronting the emptiness of the house. Within months, my sleep became shallow, my knees swelled. A heaviness settled over my thoughts like winter fog. That period taught me that emotional hunger can be just as dangerous as physical hunger. Both can drive us to consume when what we truly need is stillness, reflection, and the courage to endure discomfort without numbing it. Gradually, I returned to my old discipline. I shortened my eating window. I spent long mornings walking with nothing but water in my system and memories in my mind. The change was not instant. but it was unmistakable. My energy stabilized. My mood steadied. It felt as though my body had been given permission to resume a maintenance schedule that grief had interrupted. From that experience, I learned that longevity is not only about physiology, it is about emotional governance. The ability to sit with longing, boredom, or sorrow without immediately reaching for food is a skill that can add years to your life. Now, when younger people ask me for a single piece of advice, the one thing they must stop doing if they wish to stand where I stand, I do not speak first about calories or nutrients. I speak about constant consumption. I tell them that survival beyond 80 demands an understanding of limits. You must stop treating every fleeting sensation as an emergency requiring a snack. You must stop interpreting the natural ebb and flow of energy as a malfunction. Most importantly, you must stop fearing the empty space inside your day, because that space is where renewal begins. The body you inhabit is wiser than the culture surrounding you. It was shaped in times when food was uncertain and effort was unavoidable. If you honor that design, if you give it regular intervals of quiet, it yiwa. There is another truth that comes with age, and it is not a comfortable one. The margin for error becomes smaller. When you are 40, the body can still absorb your excesses and patch the damage quietly. When you are 60, it begins to negotiate. By the time you are 80, it simply cannot afford waste anymore. Every unnecessary strain you place upon it becomes a debt that must be paid with interest. Constant eating is one of the most expensive debts of all because it taxes every system at once: circulation, hormones, digestion, even the fragile chemistry of the brain. I have watched neighbors who were lively and hopeful in their 70s become prisoners of their own habits just a decade later. They were not defeated by one catastrophic event. They were worn down by thousands of small choices repeated day after day. A biscuit here, a sweet drink there, a heavy plate late at night because sleep would not come. These things seem harmless in isolation. Together, they form a slow tightening around the throat of vitality. The appetite becomes louder while the body grows weaker, and the person feels trapped between craving and fatigue. What saddens me most is that many of them believed they were caring for themselves. They had been told all their lives that nourishment must be constant, that skipping meals was dangerous, that an empty stomach was a sign of neglect. So they obeyed that advice faithfully, never realizing that their obedience was gradually eroding the very strength they were trying to protect. Fear, more than hunger, kept them tied to the table. I learned to see hunger differently, not as an enemy, but as a messenger. When the sensation rises and falls like a passing wave, it teaches patience. It reminds you that discomfort is temporary and survivable. Each time you allow that wave to move through you without reacting, you strengthen a quiet authority within yourself. That authority becomes invaluable in old age, when so many external controls have already been stripped away. There were long summer days in my 90s when I would sit beneath the shade of a tree with nothing in my stomach but cool water and a lifetime of memories. In those hours, I felt more alive than during any feast. My senses sharpened. I could hear the wind turning leaves, feel the subtle rhythm of my own heartbeat, sense the immense intelligence of a body that had carried me through wars, losses, and celebrations. Emptiness, I realized, was not deprivation. It was space, space for repair, space for reflection, space for gratitude. If you wish to cross the threshold into very old age, you must become comfortable with that space. You must understand that survival is not a matter of constantly filling yourself, but of knowing when to step back. The one habit you must release is the urge to respond to every whisper of appetite as though it were a command. Learn instead to listen, to wait, to allow your inner systems to complete their quiet work. In that waiting, strength accumulates. In that restraint, years are added, not in theory, but in lived reality. It'll reward you with resilience that no modern convenience can manufacture. Longevity is not purchased in supermarkets or pharmacies. It is cultivated in the disciplined pauses between meals, in the long, unbroken stretches when your system is free to repair the invisible wear of living. And let me tell you something else that most people are too busy to notice. When you stop eating all the time, time itself seems to stretch. Your day no longer revolves around the next plate, the next craving, the next moment of relief. You begin to feel a steadiness that has nothing to do with fullness. It is a steadiness that comes from balance, from the body learning once again how to move between effort and recovery without panic. In my 92nd year, I remember climbing a narrow trail behind my home just after sunrise. I had not eaten since the early evening before. The air was cool and the world was quiet in that sacred way it only is before the rest of humanity begins its noise. Step by step, I felt my lungs open, my mind sharpen, my heart beat with a rhythm that felt ancient and trustworthy. There was no heaviness in my limbs, no fog behind my eyes. Only a clean, durable energy that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than food. That morning changed the way I explained this lesson to others. I realized that survival after 80 is not just about avoiding disease. It is about preserving the quality of your presence in the world. Do you move with confidence or do you shuffle with hesitation? Do you wake with curiosity or with dread of another tired day? These are the questions that constant consumption quietly answers over the years. Every unnecessary bite pulls a little more vitality away from the future version of you who will desperately need it. There is also a spiritual dimension to restraint that I did not fully appreciate until very late in life. When you are no longer driven by the endless pursuit of taste and comfort, you begin to sense a deeper gratitude for simple existence. A glass of water feels like a gift. A modest meal becomes an occasion of genuine appreciation rather than routine indulgence. In those moments, you are not merely sustaining your body, you are honoring it. You are acknowledging that longevity is not an entitlement, but a privilege earned through mindful stewardship. I have come to see the body as a house entrusted to us for a limited span of years. Many people fill that house with noise, clutter, and constant activity until its foundations begin to crack. Very few learn the art of quiet maintenance, the willingness to turn off the lights, close the doors, and allow repairs to take place in stillness. Fasting, or simply extended periods without eating, is one way of creating that stillness. It is not punishment. It is respect. It is the recognition that life continues inside you even when you are not actively feeding it. So when you ask me what truly threatens your chances of reaching 90 or beyond, I will not point first to fate or heredity. I will point to habit, the small, unquestioned rituals that shape your biology more powerfully than any single medical event. Chief among them is the habit of never stopping, never pausing, never allowing the internal machinery to power down long enough to renew itself. If you can change that one pattern, If you can learn to endure the temporary unease of an empty stomach and discover the strength hidden on the other side, you will give yourself a chance, not a guarantee, because nothing in this life is guaranteed, but a real measurable chance to stand where I stand now, looking back across decades with a body that, though aged, still remembers how to function with dignity. And dignity, my friend, is what survival after 80 is truly about. So now you understand why I speak about this with such urgency. At 99 years old, I no longer have any reason to impress you or persuade you with fashionable ideas. I am simply telling you what I have seen, what I have lived, and what has quietly kept me standing while so many stronger men sat down far too soon. Survival after 80 is not decided in a hospital room. It is decided decades earlier in kitchens, in habits, in the private moments when no one is watching and you choose whether to reach for food or to let your body rest. The one thing you must stop doing is simple, but it is not easy. You must stop feeding every passing craving as if it were a command. You must stop believing that constant consumption equals safety. True safety, the kind that carries you into deep old age with your mind intact and your legs still willing to walk, comes from learning restraint. It comes from allowing your system the quiet hours it needs to repair the invisible damage of living. I am not asking you to fear food. Food is a blessing. It is memory, celebration, comfort, and survival. But blessing becomes burden when it is never set down. Give your body long stretches of peace. Let night be night. Let morning begin with light and movement instead of immediate indulgence. Trust that the ancient design within you knows how to heal if you stop interrupting it every few hours. If you remember nothing else from this old man's rambling, remember this. Longevity is not built on what you add, but on what you are wise enough to subtract. Learn to walk away from the table while you still feel strong. Learn to sit with the gentle ache of hunger and discover that it will not destroy you. On the other side of that discomfort lies clarity, resilience, and perhaps, if God is willing, many more years than you ever thought possible. Take care of your engine. It has carried you this far. Give it the silence it needs to carry you the rest of the way.